Hey guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. This is your host Thomas Tyree from On the Hot Podcast. Today, this will be the Combat Series episode number 65 for you guys today. Of course, this episode is going to be coming out on all four of our platforms: our Instagram account, our Facebook account, our YouTube account, and our Apple Podcast account. So, let's dive into the first segment of the Combat Series this week. I'll be sharing my fight summary on the fight that took place last night in the sport of boxing between Canelo Alvarez and Edgar Berlanga. So, last night in the sport of boxing, we saw Canelo Alvarez successfully retain his unified titles at the super middleweight division, retaining the WBC, WBA, and WBO world titles against Edgar Berlanga by unanimous decision to remain the king of the super middleweight division. So, my thoughts on the fight. If we're being honest, this was a really easy performance last night for Canelo Alvarez against Edgar Berlanga. I really had a shutout. I didn't really think Edgar Berlanga won any rounds last night in the sport of boxing. This was really a one-sided fight in favor of Canelo Alvarez. Canelo Alvarez still proved that he still has some pop, some flavor to them punches, and still packs a punch. That dangerous left hook landed on Edgar Berlanga early in the third round when he sent Edgar Berlanga to the canvas and dropped him. I thought he could have easily put away Edgar Berlanga and went in for the kill if he decided to. But Canelo Alvarez did not do that. Canelo Alvarez really just cruised to a victory against Edgar Berlanga. Edgar Berlanga was really in defensive mode last night. And once Canelo Alvarez established the power on Edgar Berlanga, he really went in defensive mode. Really was in there to survive for 12 rounds, if you want my honest opinion. Really didn't take any risk or trying to make the fight even more exciting. I mean, he did land some punches, but nothing too solid, anything to really hurt Canelo Alvarez. But in the stat sheet, Canelo Alvarez outlanded Edgar Berlanga 201 punches to 119 punches. And Canelo Alvarez also landed a total of 49% of his punches. And you could see that Edgar Berlanga, once Canelo Alvarez made him respect his power, Edgar Berlanga was not going to be there to win the fight at that particular point, but just to survive and say he hung with a legend, one of the all-time greats of Canelo Alvarez for 12 championship rounds. So, with that being said, Canelo Alvarez now picked up his 5th straight victory without a knockout win. Canelo Alvarez's last knockout win was against Caleb Plant, where he defeated Caleb Plant to become the undisputed champion at the time of the super middleweight division back in 2021. So it's been some time since we've seen Canelo Alvarez pick up a knockout victory in the sport of boxing. So with that being said, what's next for Canelo Alvarez? Now, after this performance against Edgar Berlanga, I think Canelo Alvarez has nothing left to prove at this super middleweight division. He's already became an undisputed champion at this division. He's already picked up victories against the likes of Billy Saunders, Caleb Plant, Jaime Mugina, Edgar Berlanga, even fought Jermell Charlo, who moved up to this division, defeated Triple G. There's really nothing else for Canelo Alvarez to do at this division. And I don't want to see Canelo Alvarez continue this student versus teacher boxing lessons that we got in 2024, fighting rising stars of Jaime Mugina and Edgar Berlanga. I don't want to see that for Canelo Alvarez finishing his career. So I want to see Canelo Alvarez move up to the light heavyweight division. He did express that he wants a rematch against Dimitri Bivol if he could beat Arthur Beterbiev in their undisputed championship fight. At 175, he could have the rematch against Dimitri Bivol. He could fight Arthur Beterbiev. He could fight David Benavidez finally. He could fight David Morrell. There's so many more fights for Canelo Alvarez to have at 175 compared to 168, a division that you basically already cleaned up and became undisputed at. So let's see you move up and dare to be great one more time in your career, because we know Canelo Alvarez realistically probably only has 2, maybe 3 years left in the sport of boxing. And he only fights two times a year, Cinco de Mayo weekend and Mexican Independence weekend. So let's change it up and let's see Canelo Alvarez chase greatness, fight some real competition before he leaves the sport of boxing, instead of fighting these up-and-coming rising stars that really turns out to be a sparring fest with you getting the upper hand and the fight going to your advantage, because these guys are giving you too much respect in the sport of boxing. When you establish the power, send them to the canvas once. They don't want to be in there to fight. They're just in there to survive for 12 rounds. I want to see Canelo Alvarez go out on a shield, fight the best of the best to end his Hall of Fame career. It's already going to be remembered as all-time great. Why not go out there and prove to people why you believe you are still the best fighter in the sport of boxing. So, with that being said, I also will share my thoughts on what's next for Edgar Berlanga. I give Edgar Berlanga credit for at least lasting 12 rounds against Canelo Alvarez, because truthfully, the world knows that Canelo Alvarez should have got Edgar Berlanga out of there. I want to say rounds 6 through 8. My prediction last week on the Combat Series was round 6 that Canelo would finish him off. He could have finished him off whenever he wanted. But that's why I keep saying Canelo keeps challenging these younger fighters, these up-and-coming rising stars, and letting them hang in the ring with him for 12 rounds. No, if you could finish your opponent, finish him. You're the face of boxing, aren't you? Give us a knockout. Do something instead of having a sparring fest with these fighters trying to survive 12 rounds with you. No. But I do give Edgar Berlanga a lot of credit for getting up from that left hook that Canelo Alvarez dropped him up in the 3rd round. Because, oh my gosh, I thought that was the end of the fight when he landed it. But I do give Edgar Berlanga a little bit more credit as well, because he did land some power shots on Canelo Alvarez. And if he could work on his defensive awareness and his boxing IQ and polish his boxing skills, maybe Edgar Berlanga could become a world champion at this super middleweight division one day. Some fights I would like to see for Edgar Berlanga at 168. I would like to see him and Caleb Plant fight each other. I think that's a really good fight on paper. Or I would like to see him fight Jaime Mugina. I think those two fights should be one of those two fights should be next in line for Edgar Berlanga. And those could be some pretty entertaining fights at the super middleweight division. Either him fighting Caleb Plant or Jaime Mugina next. I would like to see it in the sport of boxing. But my thoughts on the rest of the Canelo Alvarez Edgar Berlanga card. In the co-main event, you had Lara successfully retain his middleweight championship, his WBA middleweight title against Danny Garcia. And watching this fight, this was a one-sided affair. Watching Danny Garcia drop to a knee last night in the 9th round, being dropped for the first time in his career by Lara, that just took me, I guess, by shock and surprise, because Danny Garcia has been in there with some elite fighters, Earl Spence, Keith Thurman. The list goes on and on, the elite competition that Danny Garcia has seen. But he's never been dropped before, and he got dropped. And his dad, when he went to the corner for round 9, I think they're going to round 9 or round 10, his father basically cut it off and said that's the end, because he didn't want to see his son take any more damage. So I think ring rust, being out of the ring for 2 years for Danny Garcia, definitely showed in his fight against Lara. And I think this should be the end for Danny Garcia. If he wants to have one more fight, fine. But I think from what I saw last night, this should be the end for him. Pretty good career, 2-division world champion. I just don't think he has that willingness to get in the ring and actually dare himself to be great anymore. And that's okay, because that happens in combat sports. Once you don't have it anymore, you don't have it anymore. You don't want to put yourself in harm's way. So I think Danny Garcia realized that as the later rounds were going on in that fight against Lara. And I do give him credit for coming back after 2 years, a 2-year layoff in the sport of boxing, because the last time we saw him was against Jose Benavidez 2 summers ago. I do give him credit for trying to become a 3-division world champion, climbing up to 160, a division he's never fought at, to fight Lara for the WBA world title, but he just came up short. If he decides to call it off, it's been a good career. And I'll never forget the fight my favorite fight from Danny Garcia actually was when he fought Keith Thurman back in 2017. That fight could have gone either way that night when they were fighting for the welterweight titles. But man, that was one hell of a run for Danny Garcia in the sport of boxing. This is it for him. Now, on the other fights on the card, the Caleb Plant versus Trevor McCubby, that fight was the fight of the night, man. I mean, that really should have been the real co-main event on this Canelo Alvarez Edgar Berlanga card. It was good back and forth action. I never really seen Trevor McCubby fight before. I mean, I watched him on film heading into this card, but I never seen him fight live. And he was undefeated at the time. It gave Caleb Plant a run for his money. I mean, in the early rounds, from round 1 through 4, it was all Trevor McCubby's world. He even dropped Caleb Plant. But then Caleb Plant got back in the fight after overcoming adversity, got a rhythm going, landing combinations, got into the crowd, entertaining the crowd, dancing with the crowd, moving his hips like Shakira. The song Hips Don't Lie. But as I digress, Caleb Plant looked really good in there and got the finish against Trevor McCubby. So that actually earned Caleb Plant the interim super middleweight WBA title that could possibly set up for a rematch with him and Canelo next year if Canelo wants to stay around at 168. Or if Canelo decides to vacate the titles and doesn't fight Caleb Plant, or something happens, he could be elevated to being world champion again to the super middleweight division. So that was a big win for Caleb Plant. But also on the card, we had Rolly Romero. He looked decent in his victory. I expected more in his performance after being knocked out against Isaac Cruz earlier this year on the Sebastian Fendor and Tim Tszyu card, but Rolly Romero's got a lot to do if he wants to be a true contender at 140 in the sport of boxing. But those are my thoughts on the Canelo Alvarez versus Edgar Berlanga fight, and those are my thoughts on the Canelo Alvarez versus Edgar Berlanga undercard.